Paul Skenes was a part of another phenomenal matchup on Monday night.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. I am a lifelong Pittsburgh Pirates fan and have been forever and won't ever stop. And I love bringing my love of the Pittsburgh Pirates to you every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by the wonderful people over at Game Time. So make sure you go check out the Game Time app and everything that Game Time has to offer you for tickets if you want to see Paul Skenes pitch against the likes of Shohei Ohtani and Elly De La Cruz and Nolan Arenado and all the guys that he's already faced off with this season. And speaking of that matchup that we got last night, it was Elly De La Cruz versus Paul Skenes, a matchup that a lot of people anticipated. And obviously you had the matchup between Elly De La Cruz and O'Neal Cruz kind of highly anticipated as well. We were hoping we were going to see it last season, but O'Neal Cruz was on the shelf. We got to see that last night for the first time as well. Paul Skenes, by the way, folks, was pushed back a day. And that angered some people a little bit as to why he was pushed back and didn't pitch in Colorado. This is what you have to do to save a guy like Paul Skenes. You have to do these kind of things where you push these guys back. I wrote a phenomenal story over at Steel City Pirates where I discuss Luis Ortiz and his new kind of found role that he has with the Pittsburgh Pirates and why it is a beneficial role for him, because it also helps Paul Skenes and Jared Jones. That's a topic for another day. But when you look at Skenes and what he's done so far, he just continues to just be great. I mean, after last night's performance, he's up to 53 strikeouts in 39 and a third innings pitched. 39 and a third innings pitched, and he has 53 strikeouts, folks. It's a lot. It's a very good ratio to have. And he's not only garnering attention from everybody in Pittsburgh, he's garnering attention nationally, as he should. He is probably the best pitching prospect that we have seen touch a baseball since Steven Strasburg was drafted by the Washington Nationals all those years ago. Last night, he was just even more impressive. 6 innings pitched, 6 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts, and 18 whiffs on the evening. That's pretty much the start that you're going to get accustomed to when you're talking about Paul Skenes and what Paul Skenes can offer you in the rotation, what kind of starting pitcher he's going to be, all of these other things. Then you factored in, last night was a night of firsts for Paul Skenes in a lot of different ways. One, he gave up his first inning run of his career last night on a Spencer Steer double that would eventually give the Reds their only run on the evening, thanks to some good work from Colin Holderman, Aroldis Chapman, and David Bednar once again. But you consider that Skenes didn't have his best stuff last night. I don't think anybody's going to really argue that. Skenes didn't do what Skenes would normally do. And he was still great. Don't get me wrong. He just didn't have his best stuff. Now, the umpire in that game as well was very off and on. I think that's part of what led David Bell to get ejected in the game last night. But when he doesn't even have his best stuff, Skenes finds a way to get it done. And it's very nice to see from him, because that means, much like what we've even seen from Mitch Keller and Jared Jones and some of these other starters on this staff, is if they don't have their best stuff, you can still rely on them to give you a quality start. And you probably heard me mention it yesterday with Gary, that the Pirates are in the top 5 in Major League Baseball in quality starts this season. And that's not a mistake. That is not something that you look at and say, yeah, well, that's something that the Pirates can't really control and all this other stuff like that. And they can't. And you would like them to be in a much better spot due to this because, most teams that have that amount of quality starts are going to be a team over 500. Pirates are still 2 games under 500 after the win last night. But folks, he has the triple digit fastball. And what's scary about Paul Skenes, what is probably the scariest part of his game, is that that's not even his best pitch. He can throw a fastball consistently at 99. And even as we've seen already, touch 101, 102 on a consistent basis. Then he throws the slider, which has just been a nasty pitch. And I would argue the slider right now is probably his worst pitch of the bunch. Because that splinker that he likes to throw, folks, has just been torturous. It's been awful for other teams to face. Because, folks, you're throwing and just put this into perspective. Imagine you're the hitter for a second. You're seeing 100 miles per hour on a fastball with movement, mind you. That was a big talking point when he was drafted, but that fastball has some very solid movement on it. Then you look at the splinker that you get, and it's a 94 mile per hour pitch that just falls off the table on you pretty much whenever it wants. And other guys, and I just had a little bit of a voice crack over it, but you can't hit it. It's a pitch right now that Paul Skenes is utilizing just so well that you can't even hit it. And it was funny last night as well during this game. Elly De La Cruz did get the better of him a couple times. He got the better of him twice, I believe, in that game. He had 3 hits on the evening. But Paul Skenes, as I mentioned, on a night of first, picked off Major League Baseball's stolen base leader in Elly De La Cruz. And it was no shock really at all to him because Skenes is very good at keeping guys where they need to be. One, he's good at keeping guys off base, period. But when they do get on, he does a very good job at getting out of those jams. He does a very good job at keeping those guys at bay to keep them where they need to be. And it was nice. And then obviously you had Aroldis Chapman pick off a runner later in the game as well. But folks, I want to urge you on something. Paul Skenes right now on StatCast. You guys know I love StatCast. It is like my single favorite thing to talk about when it comes to players like Paul Skenes and Jared Jones and everybody. Right now, his off-speed run value is in the 99th percentile at +8. His fastball run value is in the 90th percentile at +9. His strikeout rate is in the 95th percentile, while his walk rate is in the 92nd. And his expected batting average and expected ERAs are in the 84th percentile or higher. And when you look at what Paul Skenes has done so far, I didn't think it was possible for him to show us more than what we expected, but he's done that and some. He has looked phenomenal in terms of what we've seen in his first 7 starts. And it's only going to get better. And we've already seen him have top-tier matchups with the likes of Cody Bellinger and Shohei Ohtani. And now Elly De La Cruz, who's one of baseball's up-and-coming stars. And he's just cleared every single check. Every single box has been checked by Paul Skenes. And I don't see a world where that stops. And you keep just looking at it and marveling about it to the point where I talk about the guy once a week and headline this show about Paul Skenes once a week because he just continues to dominate. He's proven coming up now that he's more than just a one-pitch guy. And even if he is, it's not the fastball. And he can continue to find ways to have a very good outing, even when he doesn't have his best stuff. That is what is most impressive to me through what we've seen from Paul Skenes, is that even when Paul Skenes doesn't have his best stuff, he still hasn't even given up more than 3 earned runs in a start yet. And he's here to stay. And if he continues, I don't think Major League Baseball has a choice but to give him the National League Rookie of the Year and maybe even put him in the All-Star game. And obviously, Paul Skenes was a big reason why the Pirates won 4-1 yesterday over the Cincinnati Reds. We'll talk a little bit about that game, as well as talking about why getting healthy will be absolutely massive for this team and patch some holes that they're missing right now. We'll discuss in a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, and you get killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, which means that Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Your lowest price guarantee from Game Time is awesome because if you find the same ticket in the same section and row for less money somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and you even get ticket coverage, meaning if you bought tickets to this Saturday's game anticipating to see Paul Skenes, and now you're not seeing him, well, Game Time will make sure you're taken care of because your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Remember, terms apply, and download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is also brought to you by Supply House. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. You can find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple clicks at supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com gives you 24/7 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the United States. If you need help with an order, you can get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team and talk to a real person, which is the best part, every single time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry pros can join their free Trade Master program with free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the Trade Master program to deliver results, and you can apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge on every order at supplyhouse.com/TM. Save time and money when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service every time. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And winning game one against the Cincinnati Reds was absolutely huge in this series. Both teams entering the series with the same record at 34-37. So somebody is going to come out of this series with a better record than the other in the division. These division games with those four teams being us, the Cardinals, the Reds, and of course the Cubs, these games mean a lot. And by the way, make sure you also go check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel brought to you by Locked On Amazon Fire TV and YouTube, where the local hosts of Locked On, like myself, are always there for you. Briefly looking back at this game, assuming a lot of you watched it, Kutch had another beautiful day, had a walk and a hit and 2 runs scored. Brian Reynolds continued his tear and his hot streak as a late batting average for Reynolds up to 271 now. He's 2 for 4 with an RBI last night. O'Neal Cruz had a big first inning RBI grounder that got right by Elly De La Cruz's outstretched glove to score Reynolds and Kutch to give the Pirates a lead that they would never give up again. Ke'Bryan Hayes had a pretty good day. He was 1 for 4 with an RBI. Rowdy Tellez up to 230 now on the batting average. Rowdy Tellez has had a very hot month of June, and he continues to look good. Even Yasmani Grandal was 1 for 3, leaving out everything else, of course, that was going on with him. And that was really it from the offensive side. Obviously, I already mentioned earlier, Colin Holderman with his 13th hold on the season. Aroldis Chapman with his 13th hold of the season as well. And David Bednar with his 14th consecutive save. So David Bednar has kind of come back to his good graces as well. Now, as far as tonight goes, it'll be Lodolo versus Falter, a left-hander's dream, as it'll be two lefties going at it in Pittsburgh tonight. Lodolo, a 2.93 ERA, 7-2. Falter, 3-4 with a 3.86. That's what we'll see tonight. Now, it's Keller on Wednesday, but then when you start getting into some of this stuff going into the weekend, we don't really know who's going to be pitching because of some injuries going on. Now, we've kind of gotten some updates about Martin Perez and Ryan Borucki and some of these other guys that have been out, and you're hoping that they come back. Even Mike Burrows is in the FCL, in the Florida Complex League, on a rehab assignment, pitching for the first time since his Tommy John surgery. So big deal there as well. When Perez comes back, that's going to be massive for this team because then you're pretty much back to full strength in the rotation. You also hope that Quinn Priester will get healthy at some point too. He's on the injured list. And once these things start happening, those bullpen games will go away, which will help a lot for this team because they won't have to overuse this bullpen so much. We've seen the bullpen usage be one of the highest in baseball right now because of the lack of guys available. Now, they did bring up Dalton Jeffries. Maybe they start him this weekend, which I'd been urging for a minute. I know Dalton Jeffries is not exactly the marquee guy that you would want, but he's a starter and he's an arm that's healthy right now. And that's big. And what's going to happen, especially when Perez comes back, and this team also expects Marco Gonzalez to come back at some point, then you're going to start really seeing things start to be patched. We've had issues with this middle relief as of late, outside of guys like Luis Ortiz and Hunter Stratton. Hunter Stratton now on the IL. What I find interesting is when Marco Gonzalez comes back, I think he'd be okay there. And you could even throw a Quinn Priester in there if you wanted to. And suddenly those holes start to get patched all around the roster when these guys start to return. And health, knock on all the wood in the world, has been great for this team overall. There has not been a massive ton of issues. We obviously had Hayes out for a little bit, and then you have the pitching staff dealing with some injuries and, of course, the bullpen. But those are expected things. But when these guys start to come back, you're going to stop seeing the bullpen games, which is in turn going to help the bullpen. You're going to start seeing those roles that we discussed earlier with the bullpen earlier this season really start to solidify themselves. You kind of already seen it with Holderman, Chapman, and Bednar, but you want to see it in the middle relief too. You want to see those guys kind of establish a role. And I think that you're going to finally see that when these guys come back, which is huge. And if the Pirates, and I'll say this as well as we wrap this part of the show up, if they can do what they did last night against the Reds and continue to pitch, folks, they'll have a very, very good chance in this series and just in general against the Reds throughout the season. But folks, what's coming next, you're going to like a lot. We are going to sit down with 2023 fourth round pick Carlson Reed and discuss some things going on in his career as he's having a very impressive 2024 early campaign season. We'll discuss with him and sit down with him in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by PrizePicks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. The NBA Finals is over. We still have the Stanley Cup Finals, so you can still bet on that. But baseball season is here. It's been here. It's the middle of summer. When hockey's done, it's baseball, baseball, baseball. All you have to do on PrizePicks is pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money with baseball-only lineups on PrizePicks. If you submit a winning lineup featuring 4 demon squares, you'll cash in big time on the biggest moments of baseball's early season. Think Aaron Nola can have more than 7 strikeouts? You think O'Neill Cruz can hit a home run? What about Bailey Falter's strikeouts or Nick Lodolo runs allowed? You can bet on all these things at PrizePicks. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks.
Thing's not going to die on me.
Oh, you're all good. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. As I alluded to in the previous segment, in the previous part of the show, we're speaking today with 2023 fourth-round selection Carlson Reed, who some of you, as Pittsburgh fans, may be familiar with from his time at West Virginia. Carlson, how you doing today down there in Bradenton, I'm assuming is where you're at right now?
I'm doing well. How are you, man?
I am doing wonderful. Got the chance to talk to you, getting the chance to talk to you after what we've seen overall so far. I was looking around and I followed your stuff because I follow everybody in the system just to see what's going on and get a good grasp on what you guys are doing at the lower levels of the system. And I turned and looked at your stats and I was like, whoa, he's having a really, really good start to the year so far. So how have you felt so far this season overall? 1, with how impressive you've been, and 2, it being your first professional season at the big league, or well, big league level technically, but you're in the pros now. So how has it felt?
Honestly, it's felt amazing. I mean, the transition from here to college is a learning process and more me learning how to become a professional. That's kind of the main thing I've been focusing on. But I mean, I love pretty much everything around here, the staff, the players. I mean, it's been a really comfortable environment, so it's been pretty easy to focus more on the baseball things than, focusing on getting comfortable.
Yeah, and I can imagine, and that kind of leads into my next question too, about what you've learned so far and what's been the biggest difference between being at West Virginia and being with the Pirates now. Obviously, that's a transition that happens pretty fast, especially out of the draft as you get drafted, and then it's kind of like, okay, you go right into it. It's not like some of the other sports where you kind of have that off season to take time and figure it out. You kind of just get thrown into it. So what have you kind of learned so far in the system that's different than what you were doing at West Virginia?
It's like mostly learned how to take it day by day and make sure that, like, I've been getting into the training room recently, trying to figure out more about my body than I have before, and just kind of doing something every day to, make my body feel good or make my arm feel good, or whether I need to know shapes and all of that. Like, that's kind of what we've been working on. And the coaches just kind of being there through everything, and they'll always ask or answer any question that I have. So, I mean, I say the biggest difference between here and college is kind of college builds that mental toughness that you need for this, because I mean, waking up at 6 a.m. for lifts and then going to class and then having a game or practice after, and then also doing homework after that, like that takes a lot. And being able to do that for multiple seasons and then getting thrown into the longest season that you've ever had, like, is all a learning process. But I truly believe that that college aspect definitely has helped me with it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting transition too. I mean, you look at guys like Paul Skenes, for instance, in the system, who we'll get to shortly, who had to do the exact same thing. And you see that transition go through, but it's also not the only transition you've went through either, because primarily at West Virginia, and a lot of people, I think, know this, you were a relief pitcher. Now they've kind of transitioned you into a little bit of a starting role. You've started 11 games this year. What's been the difference there? Kind of not coming into games later in games as you would as a reliever versus now you're pitching and starting all these games down in Bradenton.
Yeah, so I mean, with that also comes with knowing your role. So because I've kind of gone in and out of being a starter, I haven't truly been able to know who I am as a starter. So that's also what I've been learning down here. But I mean, being a reliever, I've taken some reliever things and added it to being a starter. Like the main thing I learned last year especially was just to take it one pitch, one batter at a time. Like, especially if I give up a hit, sure, cool, the guy's on first base, but I mean, he can't really go anywhere unless this guy in front of me does something.
Yeah.
So kind of just making sure to stay in the moment, and whether I walk someone or whatever, like, that's in the past. Keep focusing on what's in front of you.
Yeah, I've always joked, Carlson, that baseball, I forget the artist all of a sudden now that I'm blanking on it, but step by step, that's the whole thing with baseball. You just got to go step by step by step, take it one step at a time. And that's what I've always, like, I used to play baseball in high school, and that's what I was always told by my coaches. And speaking of coaches, you brought them up earlier about the coaches being very helpful with you in your time so far. Which one do you think's been the biggest influence on you though so far? Like, which one of your coaches have you been with close enough to say, okay, he's helped me out quite a bit already?
Oh, for sure. Got to go Coach 40. I mean, he's been more of a lighthearted coach, which is something I definitely need because I tend to get hard on myself very easily. So he's kind of implemented that step-by-step process with me, and knowing that, like, it's not a race and I can take time to actually figure out who I am. Cause I mean, I am still on the younger side. So like, I can't keep speeding past this process. Like, I need to live in the process, and he reminds me that, and it's really helpful.
Good deal. And living in the process too. I mean, that has to be a major part of this. I mean, you're playing again, you mentioned you're playing your longest season that you've ever played in your career. A lot of guys coming out of college do that. You look at Mitch Jebb, who's a part of your draft class, doing the exact same thing. Obviously a little bit different hitting and pitching. But when you're talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates right now, especially prospects, you've kind of come up now as one of those guys in the system that people are getting eyes on because of what pitching they have. And you have Paul Skenes, you have Jared Jones, you have those guys in Bubba Chandler and Patrick Riley, Thomas Harrington. What are your thoughts overall about yourself, one, and being part of this, and two, what the pitching has done to change this franchise a little bit so far through the system?
I mean, honestly, it's very cool and encouraging to be in the position I am right now. Because, I mean, like you said, Paul Skenes and Jared Jones, I mean, they're both around my age, and they're doing very well in the big leagues. So it's like seeing that is almost gives me a confidence boost. Like, I can also do this. Like, this is very attainable in the foreseeable future. So just kind of watching them and taking the time to see what I need to do to get to that level is just all really cool to be in this organization.
Yeah. And it's kind of like one thing that General Manager Ben Cherington has said is he kind of wants to build layers to this. He wants to have the Paul Skenes, Jared Jones layer, then the Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington, Patrick Riley, Carlson Reed layer, and then keep layering it down and kind of have you guys already know each other by the time you get to that level. And Jones and Skenes were a lot like that. I'm sure you're a lot like that with a lot of the teammates that you have down there. But as I always ask every player that I interview, what's one thing you could tell Pirates fans about yourself, and what are your short-term goals in 2024 and your long-term goals throughout your career as a Pittsburgh Pirate?
So I actually used to play the saxophone, and I've been playing saxophone since I was in 6th grade. So like in the off season, when I have a little more time to myself, I'll, go back into it. I'm a little rusty, but I'll get there. But in terms of short-term goals, really, especially for this season, like I just want to be a starter for the full season, kind of see how that is, since I've never really had that before, especially with the elongated season. And long-term goals, definitely want to be able to touch the field for the first time. I know I played there twice as a West Virginia Mountaineer, but I personally never got to touch the field. So I'm still looking forward to that, and, hopefully be able to, help the Pirates win a World Series again.
Yeah, and that's the aspiration that we all have. I mean, it's been since 1979, so I think people are really looking forward to it. Carlson, thank you so much for coming on with us. Guys, thank you for tuning in with us. You guys always love all of these prospect interviews that we get, so I appreciate it so much, guys. Thank you for tuning into Locked On Pirates. Follow on YouTube and all of your audio platforms every Monday through Friday, because it is free and available to you. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.